Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday, May the 20th, and our morning coffee time together. I thought I'd give Ginnery, our friendly neighborhood sapsucker, the break this morning and put on a video of the robins I filmed the other day. Had quite a fun time watching them the other morning and watching the rain, listening to the rain. As time affords, I'll cut a little compilation. So this morning we just saw the first fawn of the season too. So we've had a deer hanging around recently, and I was wondering why we hadn't seen any fawns yet this year. Usually we have a doe with two fawns hanging about the creek and wandering through from time to time. And today we had the first view of one of the new fawns after the morning meditation ended. So Ajahn Sudanto caught it outside the window and brought it to our attention. So it's nice to live close to nature. So well, I hope you all are well. Don't have much in the way of news other than a fawn came to visit us this morning. I had a nice rest and a nice morning of practice, and my mind was feeling pretty clear, like wisdom was working its way, remembering past insights. But that all kind of went out the window when I was in the last half hour trying to troubleshoot one little thing going on with the stream here. So for some reason, Skype's not cooperating with my streaming program this morning, so no Skype. But that doesn't seem to be a popular option for people anyways at this point. So, I remember something that came up. A few people emailed me wondering about the chat replay feature. And so I did a little investigation yesterday to see what was happening to the disappearing chat. And the chat replay is enabled, but apparently something that's a hidden secret in the way YouTube works is once I later in the morning go and edit the first bit of the video to take off the nature footage and the countdown so people can just get right to the interaction that we're having and any reflections or questions that are there, somehow that nullifies YouTube's ability to replay those chat messages. So usually you'll have an hour or two if you if you have a reminder set or you have the link to the daily broadcast, you can replay that. But once I do the editing and Google processes it, then the
Sorry, I don't know how to help with that. Here are other things you can try.
chat goes away. So anyways, that's probably for the best. I mean, then it's only semi-public what you say in the chat room, I guess. So so thinking about our practice this morning. Yeah, Andrew. Can one have it thus? Let my Skype be thus. Let my Skype not be thus. Yeah. This is Yoniso Manasikara, reflecting wisely on the ephemerality and the fact that we are not in control of these things. So, straight out of the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, Discourse on Non-Self. Although Buddha didn't have Skype. So, anyways, this morning meditating and revisiting this theme we've been exploring of the effects of the hindrance on the mind, and thinking in particular about the second hindrance of Vyapada, or ill will, as it's most straightforwardly translated. No, this is a bit clumsy. Many of the translators, the older translators, talk about those first two hindrances being this kind of positivity, this imbalanced positivity for the world, assessing things as being more potential of bringing you the happiness you long for than they ever could. So that's the positivity of Ajahn Sona's demagnetizing analogy. Covetousness is like one of the older translations referring to that dynamic or that field of hindrances. You could even say defilements. And grief, covetousness and grief in regard to the world. So that's a phrase that comes up again and again, referring to this classification of our relationship, and what I keep talking about as the way that we're wrongly invested in the sense realm and our engagement with the sense realm. And the grief uh, the grief has a deep connection to the covetousness, or you could say the kamachanda. Kamachanda, oftentimes, and our wishes, our wanting, our longing, our expectation for comfort and happiness in the world, is a significant source of the second hindrance of anger and ill will. If you investigate, why am I angry? Why am I frustrated? Why am I annoyed? You could explain that through like looking a little bit more at the lens of frustrated desire than just writing it off as pure anger. So I've been trying to contemplate like this connection between the two of them in daily life as various frustrations come up or various states of anger. I don't often end up at ill will. So the far end of the spectrum, the ugly end of the spectrum. And it's surprising how oftentimes it's just a violation of my desires, my expectations, frustrated desire. And that's especially true in relationship to others and the world. Oftentimes we have a lot of expectations about how it is we would like to be treated, seen, spoken to, related to. And so much of the friction in relationships is there's this unspoken expectation that somehow that relationships are satisfactory. That there's more to be had there than there really is. We're wrongly invested in the world treating us the way that feels comfortable, preferable, likable all the time. And it's a crazy notion, really. It's a delusion, a distortion, and something that has to be really investigated through mindfulness and awareness. Oftentimes encourage people to, along the lines of some of the teachings that Ajahn Sumedho's given on the Four Noble Truths, to look at those as a template for a practitioner to use and apply to extricating oneself and overcoming suffering in the present moment. Remember, our global framework, a bigger kind of project that we should be engaged in here is ending suffering. And these hindrances are dukkha. They're the nutriment of present and future dukkha, but they are dukkha in and of themselves. So if we're going to use our translation greedy, like to merely be feeling greed is a disturbance, a nutriment, a hindrance, and an obstacle to profound well-being in the moment that you're experiencing it. And we can get a little bit trapped, sort of thinking about the scale and the magnitude of the problem. Sometimes even a bit it's overwhelming to consider the magnitude of the habits of suffering and lack a sense of confidence that one could overcome them. But you're not responsible for them. I mean, the only place you can be is in the present moment with mindfulness and awareness, working your way through, trying to resolve unskillful states of mind that arise and generate skillful ones. And the very overcoming of these hindrances, the resolution of them, the overturning of them, and a return to the skillful is the ending of suffering. It's not the complete ending of suffering until we've fully developed certain faculties of mind and we have full understanding of how it is that these things arise. We've corrected for the distortions in our value systems and our views. It's not the full, we won't experience the full benefits. And there's always going to be this kind of liability. But I love to return again and again to almost any of these sets of dhammas and connect them directly to what's the end goal. Overcoming, being generous is overcoming the stain of miserliness or stinginess, which is a state of dukkha. Being acting and speaking in virtuous, ethical, blameless ways overcomes all kinds of other states of suffering and a liability. And in the application of practice, cultivating the mind, we're very directly sort of changing our mind and overturning a present state of suffering. So, and it can sound a bit theoretical sometimes when we dive into some of these models and these teachings or something, but it's not all that complicated. Just ask yourself again and again, how do I feel? Do you feel well? Do you feel as well as you could? Is the mind free? Is there a distortion? So like if we're in the grips of frustration, anger, aversion, ill will, you should be able to notice the distress in the mind, the dis-ease in the mind. And this, two of the most common similes brought up in connection with that second hindrance are, of course, the water simile talks about water heated by a fire that's boiling and distorting our view. And in particular, it's distorting in such a way that a more charitable view of what it is that's fueling frustration and anger is not seen correctly. And of course, there's this attention to the fault, this unwise attention to the fault, a magnification, a distortion of what's wrong with what they said or what they did or how the world is. And the second analogy is of being sick, literally of being sick. So there is dis-ease, sickness, dis-ease. when we are experiencing this second hindrance of anger and ill will. And we should sensitize ourselves to that. Ask yourself again and again, is this present in my mind or not? Like right now, is there any sense of dis-ease in the mind? Oftentimes there's all these unexpressed longings and desires and expectations. And they're feeling a sense of dis-ease. Like they're, and sometimes they're not even that strong. It's just like every once in a while, I catch myself furrowing my brow. It's like I have this negative stare or something at what it is that I'm focused on. And sometimes just returning to the feeling in the body or something, I catch that sense of dis-ease or tension in my brow or in my forehead, as opposed to kind of realizing that my relationship to what it is that I'm thinking about or focused on is misaligned, and it's causing dissonance and dis-ease in the mind. It's like literally I've kind of habitually misaligned and not allowing myself to be at ease. And it can be something just very simple, like I'm working on something and there's some unconscious desire for it to go easier or more quickly, or not to be so tedious or confusing, or I'm wanting it. There's competing desires. Like I didn't expect to be spending a half hour doing this. I really want to get onto that. I really want to get onto that. I expected this wouldn't take so long, and I was going to get it out of the way so I could get onto what it is I want to do. And that causes one to furrow their brow. And you're holding yourself in this state of not allowing yourself to be at ease. And if we catch that, it doesn't even necessarily take a lot of discursiveness, especially if there's this attention that's more holistic, like feeling emotionally and physically what's going on in the mind and the body. It can just be this shift back away, like the brow's furrowed, the attention's a little strained, and you notice that and relax, Sudanto. See if you can work in a way that's flowing, equanimous, free of your ideas about how it should be or shouldn't be, or how you want it to be. And the removal of hindrances can be just that uncomplicated. Of course, at other times it's not, and we have to rely on these different strategies that we've talked about. So, but I think long term, and especially if we're looking at how to integrate this stuff into our life, it's got to be simple, and it's got to be direct, and it has to be about how it is that we move through the world, see the world, interact with the world. And it's good to remind ourselves at the end of the day, this is all about how I feel. And being more skillful in cultivating a profound sense of well-being and living up to the promise of these beautiful mind states that the Buddha describes that are on the other side of the hindrances. And releasing yourself from the hindrance of anger in particular is like regaining your health. And we all know how good that feels when there's been some dis-ease weighing you down. And I mean, it feels good just to get the diagnosis sometimes, because there's a psychological burden of not understanding why it is we don't feel well. So, just to just to get a sense of clarity of what's going on, already starts us in the right direction of releasing ourselves and lessening, if not eventually overcoming, a state of dukkha. So there's a few thoughts on these hindrances, and in particular anger. There's a lot more to be said for it. It's something that shouldn't be all that difficult to find in our experience, and it's a great strategy. Like, even if you have all these doubts about Buddhism, Buddhist cosmology, your own capacity to develop meditation, it should be a no-brainer to take a look at how anger is robbing you of a more profound way of being in the world with yourself and with others, and freeing yourself from this needless suffering that aversion, anger, and ill will brings into our life. And I like to make a strong case for ill will in particular. It's like, it's a great stain, and this stuff is toxic. Like, although the water analogy for this is boiling water, I oftentimes try to think of it as like a toxin, like, sort of oil spilled into a pure mountain lake, or some foul chemical or something. Because, when you really pay attention to sort of the experience, and I've had many instances of this where my mind's been in a very sensitive state, and for one reason or another, I come into some sort of interaction with the world or another person, or even myself, the thought of myself, and I lose it, and I get angry. And I've had days in the monastery where I'm able to track the toxic effects of that lingering on through the whole of a day. Like, even just a brief angry outburst internally, not acting on it, not speaking on it, just some bloom of frustration and anger is just like somebody dumping a barrel of toxin into this body of water that we've worked so hard to try to protect and allow any impurities to settle out of or filter out of. And then it's work getting back to that. And I like thinking of this second hindrance really as a toxin, because it arouses this sense of urgency and immediacy, a call to action to really do something about it, rather than fall back into just tolerating it, waiting for its intensity to naturally sort of die down as you move through the day, and or get distracted by something else. So there's a few thoughts about the hindrances, and a little reminder there. I haven't been able to follow the chat here very much, but maybe I'll work my way up from the bottom. When is it appropriate, in addition to this internal work, to address a relationship problem externally? Maybe talk with someone whom has dis-ease or discomfort to try to work it out. Well, ideally, when one has worked it out for oneself, like the Buddha doesn't counsel trying to sort of work things out with another person until one can purify oneself. And where you want to draw the line in that spectrum of purity is maybe kind of important, but certainly you want to get away from the hurt and the ill will. Um, so I would say I think it's a good strategy when you can feel the toxic effects of frustration and anger to really take a time out, especially like if you're trying to work it out and you realize I've lost a sense of purity or I've lost a sense of balance here. Um, you know, Sometimes the other person is not going to agree or something, but uh, the wise strategy is just to put things on hold until you can regain a modicum of wellness, clear-sightedness, and well-being. And ideally, we'd like to get to a place where, rather than being driven by frustration, anger, and ill will, we're driven by a sense of goodwill for self and others and for the relationship. Uh, and the focus is on letting go, moving forward, learning, uh, well-being, enhancing well-being. So there's some guidelines for when to admonish or give feedback. And one of the important criteria is, that one speaks to the truth, that one establishes the heart of loving kindness. Um, One reflects on their own faults, especially in that particular matter that one wants to speak about. And some people in turn that interpret that as you shouldn't speak unless you're pure yourself in that own particular uh, point. But I think it's more you want to reflect and humble yourself. Uh, to guard against a sense of righteousness and being the judge. There's no need for us to be the judge. I mean, you want to have discrimination, you want to have wisdom and be clear-sighted, but you don't need to sit in judgment of others. Karma will work its way. So, and then it's difficult sometimes to discern what needs to be addressed and what needs to be let go of. But those are some of the criteria. Please answer Zuri. Please answer Zuri. Where is Zuri? Okay. Zuri, you got to vote. Is there a difference between fatigue, sleepiness, and sloth and torpor? Or whatever the Pali is. Yeah. It's not, I don't think it's entirely clear from the suttas. There's a famous sutta where Moggallana, is it Moggallana's meditating? And the Buddha comes to him and I hope I'm not misremembering this because Moggallana was like foremost meditator, so maybe I have this confused. I'm almost sure it was Moggallana, and gives him a bunch of suggestions, and he's dozing or something, and there's other places where in the suttas that give me the impression that it can be talking about fatigue or sleepiness, but and myself and my other friends have experimented with this a lot, and I question now the value of categorically always trying to push beyond genuine fatigue or sleepiness if one encounters that in their meditation. I mean, it's good to learn how to energize the mind and overcome the hindrance of lethargy and sloth and torpor. But unless one is on their deathbed or something, you could go take a nap and come back to it. Or unless you've made a commitment, like you're in a formal retreat, and we've made a collective commitment to sort of meditate for an hour together, then it's quite appropriate just to try to push through it. You don't want to break your commitment and just run out of the hall and go back to your room and have a nap. But in a lot of our daily practice, where we have the flexibility just to adjust things, if genuine physical fatigue or uh, the need to nap or sleep is really dominating the mind, then and you can't easily overcome it, then the most useful thing might be to go take a bit of nap. So, and if you really want to meditate and you don't really want to nap, take a very short nap. Sometimes even 5 minutes can really reset. And I've done this a lot before, where I don't want to. There's a certain, you need to know yourself, but in napping, there's different sort of levels, and a very short nap sometimes can reset something in the mind and the body, so that we're much more able to be alert and overcome lethargy and mental dullness. And even like a 5 or 10 minute nap sometimes. So oftentimes I would sit in a chair, or sit meditation even, might even lean against the wall, so that I wouldn't oversleep, and then just allow myself to follow the breath with the intention of dropping into a brief sleep or a brief nap. And I can also do this kind of laying down. When I was younger, I had to be more careful of it. Now it's not, doesn't seem so difficult for me to go and lay down and just go into a brief sleep and come out 5 minutes later, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is I determine. And that can be amazing. Like just even 5 minutes, a 5 minute nap sometimes can make all the difference. So, sorry if that's a bit of a fuzzy answer there, Zuri. It's, one has to know for oneself, and sometimes it's very difficult to determine if it is genuine fatigue or sleepiness, or if it's just something going on with the mind. So either are a hindrance, though. It's kind of obstructing the brighter states of mind and your ability to really uh, cultivate sort of the bright states of mind. So, Adil, sleep is a huge issue for me. Well, I don't know how old you are, Adil, but I'm guessing that when I was your age, it was a huge issue for me too. And two of the big ones in the monastery, amongst the young monks in particular, are food and sleep, and regulating those things, and learning to know what's appropriate is really critical in a focused period of practice. So these things can have a huge effect on your practice. Oftentimes when I've been doing formal retreats with people, I will give the suggestion to try to cut back and err on the side of sleeping a little bit less. And that tends to support your meditation if you get it right, because you're a little more hungry for the serenity and the refreshment, and the getting a sense of refreshment and rest in the act of your meditation. So in a sense, like, the mind becomes a little more hungry for serenity and samadhi. And if I think of it as kind of trading out foods, like, if you try to satisfy your hunger with sort of junk food or empty calories or something like this, the hunger kind of goes away. but it's not deeply nourishing. Instead, if you go and you eat something that's full of nutriments, some real nourishing sort of food, um, the hunger goes away, but you also it's a higher quality sort of experience. And sleep is kind of a necessary thing, and it's a mysterious thing. But part of what we're getting out of sleep, we can definitely, I think, get out of our meditation. And there's more benefits from getting some of what we get in sleep, some of the refreshment and relaxation uh, from our meditation. So that's something to really experiment with. And Ajahn Chah would say this oftentimes, especially to his monks: eat little, speak little, sleep little. Um, and paying attention to those three activities in particular is something you hear a lot of encouragement from the Kruba Ajahn or the Thai forest masters. They're constantly admonishing their students to uh, pay attention to those dimensions of their life because they're so important to the cultivation of their meditation practice. So, all right. Well, I have gone over. I've been really good for a while here at ending at 8:30 or close to it, but I'm over time today. So, thank you all for joining us. Good to see everyone there, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock for our morning coffee time. So, have a good day, everyone. Be well.